My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men Gay Talk. And what if your marriage was reimagined? What if it wasn't going quite the way you thought when you thought, oh, I'm a guy later in life coming out of the closet, and then everything changes? Well, of course, everything changes because there's this new reality of who you are and always have been that's coming to the surface. And today we're going to unpack what it looks like for many of my listeners who have chosen the path or considering the path of staying in their mixed orientation marriage. Now, all you gay guys who say you're, platinum gays and all that, clutch your pearls, okay? Some people decide to stay in these marriages and they make it work. Today's guest, his name is Wayne Scott. He has written all sorts of stuff, publications in the New York Times, Huffington Post, many, many places about not only this subject matter, but he has a brand new book out called The Maps They Gave Us, One Marriage Reimagined. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation because this was something I dealt with when I first came out. Am I going to stay? Am I going to go? What would it look like if I stayed? And then I realized for the better of my family and my journey, that going was the better way. But I've also found staying is the better way for many people. So without further ado, we're going to bring my guest, Wayne Scott, in. He's a therapist and an author, and book is out, just came out in February. So congratulations, Scott, on that one.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, and plus you're a writer. So this is always kind of, it's shown up in different ways, right? You've had some other successes along the way with some of your other books. So why don't you kind of, two open marriages in one small room, kind of give us like the history, and then now here we are today with the maps they gave us, One Marriage Reimagined. How did you get here?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you with the book came together. This is my first book, actually. First book. I never actually saw myself as a book writer. I wrote essays, and wrote essays often in a very personal voice. And as my wife and I were going through the experience of moving from monogamous, more conventionally defined monogamous bond to a non-monogamous bond, I found myself writing short essays about some of the different weird and interesting experiences that we had along the way. And at a certain point, I realized I'd written so many of these little pieces that if I kind of strung them together chronologically and looked at them, I had the makings of a book. I just had to fill in a few cracks here and there. And so that's where the book came from. So it's been kind of dribbling out over the last 10, 12 years in different publications. And then finally made it into book form.
Kind of reminds me of mine. I started writing for Huffington Post way, way back when, and had some pretty good traction. Then I started writing for another, again, mostly essays, short articles and stuff. Wrote for a website called Your Tango. I was probably the only quote gay voice on that site for a while. And then I'm like, well, there's a book in me. I've always known there's a book. I mean, I wasn't ever like, oh, let's go write a book, but I kept feeling like, oh yeah, there's a book in here. And that's when Frankly My Dear, I'm Gay came out. Now I'm kind of taking the path that you have, that like I've been writing a lot of little essays. My second book is a bunch of essays around being unapologetically yourself. And so yes, fill in the gaps. That's an interesting way to say it. Like, well, here's an idea. So now how do I mold that gap together to make it work? But even being in a mixed orientation, I would say, or mixed orientation marriage is, well, about filling the gaps, right?
Yeah. Well, one of the interesting things I found, when I strung all the essays together and I looked at them, is you start to notice certain through lines. You start to notice certain recurrent themes. And one of the strongest through lines I noticed was that in order for my spouse and I to have gotten through the different experiences we got through to build what we currently have, there had to be a lot of devotion. We had to really want to make it happen. We had to be really committed to each other to want to build a different kind of a structure around the feeling. And so it was kind of an odd thing. Like when I first started to think about doing this, I didn't realize I might be writing a love story. But actually, when I looked at the whole of it, I was like, oh, this is kind of a love story. It's just kind of a love story that comes out of an unlikely place. You know, when you meet the couple, I'm going to refer to them in the third person. We meet them, when it opens, they're in the prologue, they're on their way to see a divorce mediator. And they are 100% committed that this is the course they're going on, right? And like a lot of couples who think they're going to be divorcing, especially if they have kids, there's a long liminal period of discerning and sorting and trying to figure out, is this the right thing? What do we want to do? Is this, like there's a lot of ambivalence and that you've got to kind of figure out. And at a certain point, the mediator, who was also a couples therapist, she said, the two of you are not really making very much progress towards divorce. You actually seem pretty darn connected to me. And I'm wondering, would you ever think about having an open marriage, a non-monogamous arrangement? And at the time, so this would have been around 2008, right? At the time, we were shocked that she could make such a suggestion. I did not think that that was within the accepted clinical menu of things that a couples counselor could say. And so we were shocked, and we told her that. And she said, you can make your marriage anything you want your marriage to be. You get to tell the story of who you are and who you are to each other. You don't have to always be fulfilling a societally prescribed script. And so definitely, you're like, she said, it's not that it's like a piece of cake. You don't have the same amount of social support. There is some stigma attached to these kinds of arrangements depending on where you move in the world. She said, but if you want to make it happen, you can make it happen. And so we kind of, it was very important that she opened that door and she said, you know what, you could make this work if you wanted to make it work. And we went back and we talked about it. And we decided, we were very nervous about it because we had no role models. And we sort of said, well, we'll commit to it as an experiment. And we'll see what it feels like. We'll see. And if it doesn't work, we kind of gave each other the assurance that we would make it as easy as possible to kind of have a divorce situation, to make the transition that is divorce. Right. But we would at least have this experiment and see, because the other thing was that there were still so many things we enjoyed about each other. So many things we enjoyed about having a family, raising kids. There were so many ways in which we were on the same page. It was just it didn't fit anymore for me to lop off a part of myself to fit into the heteronormative container that had been offered to us when we first got married.
It's so interesting, Wayne, because so much of this is actually happening in so many people's worlds, but it's happening without people talking about it. And then they're like, oh, you're cheating on me, or you're doing this. Well, what would happen if we said, let's have candid conversation?
Yeah.
Let's really do this. And even so, I went through this a few years ahead of you. So 1999 is when I said, here, I'm gay. Here we go. I mean, I had said that earlier in my life, but we won't go into that because the people have heard that story too many times.
Okay.
But I remember sitting in my therapist's office with my then now ex-wife, and similar question was asked. And as soon as she asked that, I definitively said, I do not see that working for me. And I remember my wife just falling apart right then and there. And she goes, why do you say you can't see that working? I would be willing to do that.
Oh, okay.
And I said, here's why. Because that won't work for me. I want a relationship with a man. I want to be in a relationship with a man 24/7 on a regular basis. I love you and the girls. I love them. I loved them at the time. It was breaking my heart, but I said, here's what I know my truth is. And I can't see myself sharing me with a man and me with you equally. I'd much rather be in a space where I'm like, I can better support you, not being part of the equation, than trying to juggle this.
Okay. Yeah.
But I remember the same question. And my wife was like, can we at least try? I'm like, sure, we can try. I think we tried for a month or two. And even with boundaries and all that sort of stuff, we learned really quickly we couldn't do it because there
Wasn't
was
for
too
us, right?
much. Yeah, it wasn't for us.
Yeah.
Yet I have worked with many people that I've actually said, I wonder if this isn't your best answer.
Mm-hmm.
If it's not your best answer, to try the mixed orientation, which comes, as you know, I'm sure if I said, so give us all the tips, Wayne. Um, there's a lot of tips out there, but at the end of the day, to make it work is what's got to work for you and your spouse.
Yeah, it's a very individual path, and you kind of, and nobody can hand it to you. You really, and you can get support and you can find your people. I mean, I happen to live in Portland, Oregon, so it's a very socially progressive environment. So when we
Mm-hmm.
started down this path, we did eventually very quickly find other families in similar situations who were trying to do the same thing. So we found our fellow travelers,
Yep.
and that was super, super helpful. But yeah, you know, it's you're moving into an uncertain area.
Well, I think that uncertainty, from my perspective, is where you begin to learn more about yourself. Your
Yeah.
partner learns more about themselves. You learn more about each other. I'm a guy who's in an open marriage myself right now,
Hmm.
and we learned a lot about each other. And there's been ebbs and flows. Like, okay, we're like, yeah, let's go completely open, and then there's ebbs. It's like, no, let's rein it back in a little bit. And then there's like, well, how much conversation do you have? How much conversation don't you have?
Yeah. Right.
And it is very much what works for you and your partner.
Right.
And I love you using that phrase, finding your fellow travelers, because there's fellow travelers in these open relationships that are, yeah, we're just open and we just, whenever we want to go hook up or be with somebody, we just go do it.
Mm.
And there's others of us like, no, I got to have a connection to somebody. There's got to be something more than just, hey, let's just go do it. So,
Right.
what are some of the lessons you think you've learned most that have helped you, not so much your wife, but you personally about, ooh, here's what makes it work for me to be in a non monogamous,
Yeah.
very much permission based relationship?
Yeah. Well, I think the big thing I always like to I actually was in a bookstore the other night, and this is the thing, new authors, like, they probably do it a lot, but whenever I go into a bookstore now, I look to see if they have my book, and then I look to see where they put it, like what
Mm-hmm.
genre they put it in. And so I went to a bookstore last night. It was in the self-help genre, and which I was like, oh, I don't like that, because it's a memoir. It's just one person's personal story, and I was really just trying to tell a story in an artful way, right? So I don't really feel like I'm giving. I would never prescribe a non-monogamous course to anyone because it is difficult. And
Mm-hmm.
in fact, actually, the first lesson for me, and I think my spouse as well, is that we needed a lot of patience, with a
Mm.
very kind of messy process.
Yep.
There's a lot of figuring out what can we tolerate, what protections do we need, how do we honor our own relationship while also honoring that we have needs of other people, right? how
Mm-hmm.
do we how do we respect and honor the other people, that the special friends that we create relationships with, because you also don't want them to feel like they have some kind of diminished status in your life. So there are all kinds of questions that need to be sorted through. For us, a lot of it, in this story, a big part of it is that we had 3 school-age children, and so
Mm.
that's just like that's a very busy time in a family's life. It's a it's
Yep.
a it's a fast moving carousel,
Yep.
right? And so there's a lot going on. It's a lot of people's needs. And so for us, we very much structured it that we really centered our marriage, and our family, and we allowed, and it was okay to pursue outside relationships, but we did it quite carefully, and we always
Mm-hmm.
did it with the idea that the marriage is primary. So when I connected, the first person that I started going out with was actually another bisexual, heterosexually married man with children, same age as my children,
Mm-hmm.
who was also committed to staying with his wife. And so that was very kind of symmetrically balanced. And we both actually made a promise to each other in the book. It's actually one of the scenes in the book where we kind of promised to each other we're going to we're going to make sure that the other guy stays on track with his marriage. We wanted to honor that we both wanted to stay married. to our spouses. We felt a deep loyalty and love and commitment to our spouses. And like you don't know, because when you're going down this path, you don't know if you're going to get confused or forget yourself or lose
Yep.
track of things. And so we were that reminder to each other, in
Mhm.
addition to pursuing a special friendship that we had.
Yeah. I always, well, not always. Let me take that back. Once I traveled through the initial stuff and I started like getting my head on straight, and then once I'd been in my relationship with my husband for a good number of years, and then once I started writing the book and everything, I came to this point where I really want to help people navigate this with two things in mind. Do it from a place of respect for yourself and others.
Mm-hmm.
Because if that piece is missing, you're probably going to have challenges. It's challenging enough even with that.
Yeah.
But I have found for me, I can't work with, and this is usually where somebody's listening is like, oh, I guess I would never work with him. I have a really hard time of working with somebody who's going through this, like, okay, it's all about me. I've taken care of them. I've given them the house. They've got the kids, all this sort of stuff. So now it's me. It's all about me, 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 me.
Yeah.
It is about you. But if there's this much disrespect, I'm always surprised when they're like, yeah, my spouse doesn't want to have anything to do with me. I'm like, well, what have you been saying about? And I had one client say, well, I just told her it's time for me to live. I've been helping you live all these years. It's my time to live. I'm like, wonder why she really is pushing and demanding more and all these things. I think it's all in our own personal approach to this to create that space.
Well, I think one of the other lessons that I got from our journey is that it also takes a lot of courage to go down this path, because there's a lot of stigma attached to these arrangements. There's also a lot of shame generally attached to sexuality. There's homophobia, when we're talking about the mixed orientation element. And so, so it's really easy to fall into the trap of keeping secrets, of not wanting to make it too transparent what you're doing, who you're doing it with, and that kind of thing, because it's safer. I mean, in many ways, it's kind of safer because there's so much shame, stigma, and all that kind of stuff. I mean, we still live in a world that is very hostile towards LGBTQ community, and to mixed orientation arrangement, anything that looks different or other. We're very hostile towards that. So I kind of respect that, people have to be careful as they go down this path, but they need to have courage to do what you're referring to have respect for self and other. You also have to be very honest. You have to be very truthful, even though it's hard. It's hard to be real and truthful about who you are and what you're doing.
Well, the thing is, you started touching on this. It's not only about what you are doing, but it's what the rest of your inner circle is now going to be doing as well. Kids, my kids were really young. My youngest was only 18 months old when this was all unfolding. My oldest was 5.5. So different sort of, this was really tough because 5.5-year-olds like, what do you mean you and mommy aren't going to live together anymore? 18-month-old didn't really know anything.
Yeah.
But now, hindsight looking back, it's like my youngest one doesn't ever even remember the two of us having lived together, So there's different pieces. And then you do bring the hostilities of the world. And it was always top of mind for me. I mean, my ex fought me a little bit on this because I said every year when school started, we'd go to, parent night, welcome back to school night. And I'd say, okay, I'm going to go have the conversation with the teacher. And she's like, I don't know why you feel compelled to have that. I said, because our kids are sponges. They're used to living in our world.
Yeah.
All it takes is one time, mostly my youngest one who had no filter. So it was more like, let's correct the filter real quick. Not telling her she couldn't talk about her family, but I would go to the teacher and say, here's something you just need to know about our family. We are a mixed family. I am gay. My wife is a heterosexual. I have a husband, and I just need you to know that so if anything comes up.
Yeah.
And some teachers were really open and respectful most of the time. Some where I could tell the flinch but they had to like be who they were. They're in the public school system. But I think this is the thing that often gets lost in the whole equation, that if you're going to allow whatever it is, come out, separate all that, or come out, stay together, bisexual, have your open relationship. There's a lot of tentacles, and you have to address all the tentacles.
Right.
You can only do so much if somebody in the tentacles isn't going to accept you. But I think it's out of respect and going, okay, we know where we're going. So how do we best navigate this as a family unit? I think that's the important piece.
Yeah.
What is something that you feel like, having brought your children through these doorways, has helped you be a better parent to them?
Yeah. There's two things I would say to that. The one thing I would say is that, probably the most common question I'm asked by friends, family, and now podcasters and interviewers, now with the book, is, oh my gosh, what happened with the children? How are the children doing? As if we were kind of like foisting some awful situation on them.
Can I just say I really hate that question? I hate that question, because I used to get asked that question. I'm like, oh yeah, we force fed this to them. Like, this is, we're horrible parents.
I think that the interesting thing is I don't think our children at a certain point, they really didn't care. Most children do not care about their parents' romantic sexual lives and things like that. It's not something that's on their radar. They're more focused on what it feels like to be a family, whether there feels like there's kind of interpersonal harmony and goodwill and love between the parents. That's really the thing that people focus on, and that I think my kids remember. When I published this essay in the Modern Love column in the New York Times, Two Open Marriages in One Small Room, my son is one of the characters in this true story that got published there. And so they when they adapted it for the podcast, they said, could we interview your son? Could he be part of the podcast? Because he's a character in the story. We want to hear what he says himself about it. So they did a pre-interview with him. And they called me back after the pre-interview, and he said, you know what, it's not really going to work with him. And I was like, why? And he's like, he has nothing interesting to say about you. There's nothing interesting about this arrangement as far as what he said. And I thought that was like a really important point, that they just didn't notice, because we had committed to such a level of honesty and transparency with each other that we just got along really well. We were a pretty cohesive unit. We were trying our best to work well together and to accommodate each other's differences and needs. The other thing I would say, for any parent that is coming out around their sexuality, is you never know who's watching. You never know who's watching. So when my daughter was 13 years old, she in the car, on the way home, she said, Dad, I have something I need to tell you. Right. And she came out to me. And I think that there was something about her knowing who I was, knowing that, who her mom and I and their mom's support for me and stuff like that, that made it very, very safe and seamless for her to just say who she was. I mean, it was like turning on a switch and then it was over. It was the simplest coming out I've ever witnessed. And partly it's because she knew that I was safe. She wasn't growing up in a home where the secret was being protected. And a lot of kids do grow up in homes where they know that there are secrets, right? And they may know what the secret is, or they may just project things to a blank screen, but they know that there are things that aren't being discussed.
Yeah, mine was a secret home for sure. Yeah. When I came out early in life, it's like, okay, well, we're not going to talk about this. We're going to go get you some help. We're going to get you to talk to the pastor, all that good stuff. And it was not, and then it wasn't easy in the home to begin with, because it was like, oh, we're not going to talk about, the abusiveness and stuff that was happening in the home either. And so you kind of adopt those things. And one of the things I didn't want our daughters to go through was the secrecy, Of course, then I blew it. My first Huffington Post article was how I blew it with my oldest daughter, and like freaked out when she said she was dating a girl, and I had a meltdown. But the meltdown was because all I could hear was my parents saying, "See, you're going to turn them gay. You're going to ruin their life." But it is an interesting journey, and now that I look forward, to like grandkids and stuff like that, that's a whole nother journey. I'm like, okay. How do we navigate that? And I'm like, we'll navigate it the way we've navigated everything else. It's going to just show them a lot of love and fun. And, and when the questions come up, one of the things I vowed throughout the entire time of the kids were young even into adulthood, it's like, I'm never going to lie to them. I'm also not going to give them more than they understand,
Right.
give them just
Right.
what they can bite off and understand. So as you have now navigated through this and you're sharing it in this book, what is something that you look forward to, given that you're in this relationship? And like all of us, we're getting older. What's something you continue to look forward to with continuing the relationship with your wife?
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting question to ask now because our last kid left home about a year and a half ago.
Mm,
And so, so we have the experience now living in our own in the house where we raised them, just the two of us and our two cats. And so it's kind of nice to have a lot of free time, a lot of free discretionary time with each other. It was hard to get used to in the beginning, but now that we haven't had any trouble filling it up, thinking about vacations that we want to go on, thinking about ways we want to bring our young adult children back together,
mm,
to do things with us and stuff like that. um, Thinking about, all the things people at our age think about, selling
yeah,
the house, what's the next place you live going to
right.
look like and stuff like that. I mean, it can be kind of fun to, it's nice to be able to navigate the transition together.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's nice to have been through so much together and to
Mm-hmm.
hold so much of each other's history, um, while as we go over these next milestones, in life. And that's not to say, actually, I want to just be really clear too. I think the amount of stigma that is attached to divorce is wrong. I think it is it is a social evil. People should not feel badly when they have to make that kind of transition in their marriages. Um, I just would, one of the other, you asked about lessons learned. I mean, one of the things I wanted to communicate with the book is that marriage and intimacy should be sites for creativity and adaptation and growth and evolution, right? And imagination. That people, it should be okay for people to evolve their relationships and not have them have to be solidified or calcified in these molds that are given to them when they're in their 20s, or whenever it is
Right.
that whenever it was that they got married.
Right. Well, there's been such an emphasis on traditional, marriage structure and everything throughout
Yeah.
my lifetime. I mean, we all grew up with it, and now there's almost like this interesting dynamic in the younger generation. Like, but what if we don't want to mold to those kind of,
Yeah. Which is great. I mean,
statuses?
with my work in my psychotherapy practice and with my younger clients, I love hearing people having very open conversations about what kind of marriage they want to have, and what does monogamy or non-monogamy mean to
Mm-hmm.
them. I think it's a healthy thing to have the conversation when when my spouse and I were coming of age and deciding that we wanted to formalize our relationship, get married. And when we met with the clergy person who was going to marry us, I mean, he was very direct with us. If you're going to get married, you have to have God and fidelity in the vows. You
Mm.
have to have those two things. And there wasn't really any conversation about it. It was just, no, this is how we do
Yeah,
things.
this is how it's done.
And it sent a
Yep.
really strong message to me. Oh, we can't have this isn't a conversation. This isn't something where we
Right.
explore, because when we got together, we both knew that I identified as bisexual. We both knew that I had had relationships with men and with women.
Mm.
But it's interesting as you go down the path, especially in a kind of heterosexual coupling. Certain conventions and expectations are kind of imposed on you, and you start to lose track of yourself, lose track of who
Yes.
you were as you try to fulfill the mold that's given to you.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, I think like over time, especially raising children, we both, I think, felt in different ways that we kind of lost track of parts of ourselves that were
Mm-hmm.
important. And for me, it was very much the connection to the queer community, the connection
Mm.
to queer identity, queer history, that felt like a loss to me, and something that I couldn't, that I kind of had to admit that I kind of couldn't do without it.
Yeah. So I'm curious, since you just brought this up, I was going to go there, but you brought it up. How do you feel being bisexual in the queer community is embraced?
I think better now than it used to be. You know, I mean, I'm 61. So when I was coming out when I was 19, bisexual was a very suspect word.
Mm.
People didn't think it was its own identity. People thought of it very much as a transitional identity, a false identity, and that really it was binary. You were gay or straight. And then when the AIDS pandemic hit,
Yep.
then it became even more loaded and toxic. The
Mm-hmm.
bisexual men were seen as the carriers of the virus from the gay community to the straight community. So the last thing in the world you wanted to do in the late 80s and early 90s was to say that you were bisexual.
Yep.
Now, like behaviorally, that's what I looked like.
Mm-hmm.
But and the word queer also in that era, the word
Oh
queer did
yeah.
not exist. The word queer was
Nope.
just pejorative then. Now we've got this idea of the LGBTQ plus community. We've got the word queer, to these big, expansive, inclusive words. So, I think it's like perfect and easy, but it's definitely more inclusive than it used to be. I think, I still have a somewhat uneasy relationship to the word queer just because I move through the world in a straight passing relationship. And so there are a lot
Yep.
of privileges and safety that comes along with that I definitely will admit I enjoy.
Yeah.
But obviously I have a book out now and I've written about this. And so like I'm in a straight passing relationship, but a lot of people now know who I am and
Yep.
know kind of about my life experiences and stuff like that. But I think for a lot of queer people, that might be hard,
Mm-hmm.
that you get this privilege that they don't have.
Yeah. But every one of us that you already alluded to, every one of us has this piece of a trait within us called courage. And I think the more
Mm-hmm.
courage we have to navigate in the world as we are as LGBTQ plus individuals, if we lose our courage, we've lost the battle.
Mm-hmm.
Every day, like just even recording this podcast, both of us are coming out. Yes, it's my podcast, but there's days, we were at the swimming pool yesterday swimming laps, and this guy said hi to my husband, and then we got out of the pool. My husband said, "Hey, this is my barber, whatever his name was. This is my husband." And I'm like, "Okay, well, there's a lot of people sitting around that just heard my husband say that. Not that I was embarrassed or anything, but I don't think that people understand every day is a courage moment. You
Yeah.
just, especially given things going on in the country that we live in right now.
Yeah, it's
There's a
very
lot of
hostile
courage.
right now. It's
Yeah,
very
very
hostile
hostile.
right now
And
to the LGBTQ community, especially to the trans community,
yes.
who are very kind of connected to us. And yeah, we're entering a new hostile era
Mhm.
after a period of relative, where there
Celebration
was
and
where there's
acceptance
an
and
expansion of rights and privileges and protections. And so, yeah, courage is the word.
yeah, absolutely. So what is the thing you're most excited about the book being out?
I'm very pleased with the cover. The cover
Mm-hmm.
was a source of a lot of pleasure for me because it's a sketch of a couple holding on to each other, spooning in bed.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love that they're holding on to each other. The name of the artist called it Lovers Dreaming. And I love that it's a sketch. I love that it's still forming,
Mm-hmm.
because I think that's kind of representative of the story, which
Yeah.
is it's a draft that's being revised. The marriage is a draft that's being revised. It's a story that's being updated. Um,
Yes.
so, and I'm pleased to I'm at the stage now where people who have finished the book are contacting me and saying what it meant to them,
Mm.
and that's been super super gratifying because because you're a writer, so much of writing happens in isolation. It's
Yes.
very very lonely process, and maybe your writer friends tell you what they think, but they also like you, and so maybe
Right.
they're you don't know how honest
Right.
they're being, you know
Yeah.
but so it's nice when people can see it as this complete work, and they're responding to it with their whole selves, and they're saying what it opened up for them, in terms of their
Mm-hmm.
awareness about sexuality, desire, the complexities of desire, and the challenges of being in long-term relationships. So that's been really fun, and I'm looking forward to more of that actually.
Well, I love the fact that you are bringing into this dialogue of sexuality, gender, and all this. I mean, you're not the first, okay? Well, let's be honest. There's lots of mixed orientation marriages, but you're bringing your perspective, and a lot of times this is what's missing. You know, when I wrote my book, I'm like, I wasn't the first guy to come out of the closet who was married and had kids and all that, but it was the way I did it that got a lot of people to go, oh, okay, yeah, I can relate to him. They could relate, but there's certain twists and turns of how I told the story and how I was a little flippant and funny and sarcastic about it. And some people didn't like that. That's okay. But I think this is the beauty of when we start to share our experiences as writers, as podcasters, as, you know, artists, however you want to look at it, it connects. And even if it only connects with one person that's like, ooh, I needed to hear that. That's, to me, the important piece. I'm not doing this for the glory. Yes, I want to make some money on my books, on my podcast. But man, if I can just help somebody else who's like, I'm the only one. I'm the only. I was at a gay men's, well, shouldn't say that, GBTQ men's retreat a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that was asked of us is if something resonated with you to say, just like me or me too. And at first we weren't getting a lot of that. Man, by the third hour into the retreat, I mean, we were only a few hours in, there was some, me too, or just like me starting to be thrown around. And there were some people like, wait, I thought I was the only one, you know? And I think that's the beauty of these kind of works, these kind of beautiful pieces of artistry, like what you've done in your memoir here, is going to help somebody else go, yep, just like me, just like me. And I think it will burnish some of the preconceived notions of the only way through is divorce and get out. The only way through is do this. There's lots of ways. And I think that's one of the things that I noticed, Wayne, as I was preparing for this, is you are really giving people that option of there's more than one way to go through this.
Yeah, it's not a binary universe. It's not just marriage or divorce or gay or straight. There's lots of different ways of creating a more fluid, creative, adaptive arrangement as you move through life together.
Absolutely. Well, I'm very excited for you, sir. Thank you so much for giving up your time and being part of this. And I'm going to do, when I feel really compelled, I'm going to offer your book to somebody. If somebody is listening and they're like, that is me, reach out to me at rick@rickclemons.com. Let me know you'd like a copy of the book, and I will send you a copy of Wayne's book on my dime, because I feel you're one of the few people that has come from this perspective. And I mean, I give books away quite a bit, but there's something about this perspective that I know that I have a pretty wide swath of guys in this space. That, because I coach people coming out of the closet.
Gotcha.
And it's always beautiful for me. I mean, I've had more than, I'm not going to tell you how many, but a lot of clients that I'm like, I think you might be better off staying where you're at. And learning how to do boundaries and learn about non-monogamy and what does that look like. And I think there's lots of ways to dance in this world. And I believe do the dance that works for you. So anyway, thank you so much, Wayne, for being here. Good to have a West Coaster on my podcast. And
if I could, I don't know if you have, but if people are interested in getting the book through the publisher or anything like that, they can go to my website, which is waynescottwrites.com. And that way you go directly to the publisher. It's a small independent press, and that's the best way to patronize them. And
well, then I will go there too when I order it. So I love that. We'll have all that available on the website, everyone. So if you need anything when it comes to Instagram posts and everything, will be links back to Wayne's site, to my site, and go out and support like the independents. They need that support as well. So, but once again, Wayne, thank you so much for sharing of yourself, being honest and open and forthright. And thank you for doing the journey.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. And all guys listening, if you know somebody who could use this, please reach out, let them know about the podcast. And once again, if you are interested in joining us for some of our monthly chats, they happen the third Monday of the month. I think there's one coming up just a couple of days from now, actually, from when this show airs. You can always go to gaymενschats.com. You don't have to be just gay. I have bisexual guys show up there all the time as well. We do it once a month, and we talk about everything that gay and bisexual men and trans and queer men should be talking about that we aren't, just like maybe you need to stay in a mixed orientation marriage. So thanks again, Wayne. And thank you guys for being listeners. And we'll catch you in just another week with another episode of 40 Plus Gay Men, Gay Talk. Take care.
That's a wrap for 40 Plus Gay Men, Gay Talk. where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40 Plus Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.